Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I have a Halloween card for the latest lawnscaping challenge, which is to create a fun non-spooky Halloween project using Lawn Fawn stamps. They're calling it Too Cute to Spook. So for today's card, I knew that I wanted to work with these Chalkola chalk markers because I had used them before on black cardstock and got really great results. So I thought that I would play around with them again on black cardstock for the black and orange for Halloween. And then I pulled out a bunch of different Lawn Fawn stamp sets because I wasn't quite sure what I would be using, but I knew that I had a lot of options. I personally really love Halloween, and I like to make Halloween cards and send them to family and friends. And I know not everyone's is into that, but they just can be so fun, and there's no obligation to give gifts and stuff at Halloween. It's just sort of a really fun holiday. And so I know that everyone who has gotten them really enjoys that little surprise in the mail. To use the Chalkola premium chalk markers, I have to first squish down the squish down the tip until the ink starts to flow. So you see there, I shook it up, and now I'm pressing it until the ink flows through the tip. And the first time that you activate it, you will get some ink dripping down, but that's okay. You can just kind of like tap it off a little bit, wait till it's smooth, and then it's ready to use. But that's the only time you have to worry about that. Once they're activated, you're good to go. So I'm using this spiderweb stencil from Memory Box, and what I'm going to do first is try applying the chalk marker through the stencil. Turns out that this was not my favorite way of applying the chalk ink, and I think that part of the reason for that is because I probably should have used some spray adhesive, temporary spray adhesive, to adhere the stencil down so that the black areas would really be truly masked off. But because this marker comes out sort of similar to paint, it sort of seeped under the edges. So if you're going to use this in this sort of traditional application, I would recommend using some removable adhesive to keep the stencil down. But I come up with a different way of using the stencil because once I pulled this up, and it turns out that there was kind of a mess under there, although actually it dried to be much more interesting than it looks there, I thought, well, this chalk marker is a wet erase marker, so if I apply some water, I would be able to then lift up the ink off of this plastic stencil, because the stencil is a non-porous surface, which the chalk markers are meant to work on. They're meant to write on a non-porous surface and then to wet erase off. They're not dry erase markers like this sort of traditional markers that you use on a chalkboard, but instead they're wet erase. And so I just tried around a variety of different ways of using it. So I wanted to apply a little bit of extra ink to the stencil. So when I applied the ink and I used some water to wet the area, I noticed that there was kind of an interesting pattern of ink left on the mat, and so I tried pressing the paper into it, and then finally I spritzed and got this stencil a little bit damp with the color on top of it. So I'm getting the chalk marker damp, activating it so that it will use its wet erase properties and come off onto the black paper, but this time a little bit more of a controlled impression, and this winds up being my favorite impression. So you want to make sure it's damp but not too wet, and the surface underneath is clean so that you get the best impression. And that's how I got the one that I finally decided to use for the card. However, I wind up with 4 different pieces with the black background and the orange chalk marker on it, and I could see using all of them. I just felt like the one with the sort of truest impression there would look good in the particular style of card I was doing, but I could see adding some more layers and any of these backgrounds looking really interesting. So now that I've experimented and I've finally picked a background that I like, I'm ready to move on to the Lawn Fawn stamping part. I have some vellum here because I thought that it would be really fun to stamp those ghosts on vellum to give them that transparent quality. When stamping on vellum, the most successful ink to use is StazOn. I have heard some people say that other inks will eventually dry on vellum, but I personally have had the most success with StazOn. The thing to keep in mind, though, is that this vellum is a slippery surface, and so when you stamp the stamp down, you're going to want to make sure that you give your impression straight up and straight down. Because if you wiggle it around even a little bit, it will show in your stamped image and you'll get sort of a blurry image. So just be really precise and lift directly off the paper. Any sort of curve will definitely be noticed. In order to adhere these ghosts down, I considered a variety of methods, but ultimately decided that I would use a two-way tape that covered the entire fussy cut surface of the ghost. So you could use something like Elizabeth Crafts Designs or Score tape, where it's a really large piece of tape like I have here. And if you cover the entire ghost, the adhesive won't look odd. Even though you'll see adhesive, it'll be the same everywhere. And so it won't seem particularly noticeable. It will seem very intentional. And so I'll do the same thing with the sentiment as well. I had cut that black cardstock out of the stitched rectangle die from Lawn Fawn, and I decided to mount it with a little bit of vellum just because I'm really not adding much more color. And so I didn't want to put a color in the background, and instead just wanted to sort of carry that vellum throughout the card. This sentiment is from the same stamp set that I found the ghost in, and I stamped it again on the vellum, and I cut the banner edges into it, and again adhered all of the adhesive all over the vellum. So it will have the same exact look as the ghosts, just in order to keep it really consistent. And after I decide on placing the sentiment in the bottom right hand corner there, where I know that it won't distract too much from the spider webs, because I really liked how there was a nice crisp impression in the top right hand corner, I decide I will layer a grouping of 3 ghosts around it. These ghosts are from the Spooktacular stamp set from Lawn Fawn, and I like the idea of using the vellum here because it lets you see that fun background paper that we created through the ghosts, yet doesn't take too much away from them because that adhesive adds a little bit of bulk to the transparency of the vellum. And once I have those 3 ghosts adhered down there, I'm ready for just some final embellishment. I'm trying to keep the card relatively simple so that the background really stands out. And even though I'm using the ghost images, which might seem a little bit creepy, I think because of the general cuteness of the Lawn Fawn stamps, it still fits in the too cute to spook theme. I wanted to just add some embellishment with the gems here, but I didn't have any orange gems, so I just took an orange Copic marker and colored yellow gems orange. That's an easy way to switch up the color, and you could color white gems orange, but I didn't have a lot of white gems. I do have a lot of yellow, and they don't tend to get used, so it's kind of a way of taking a supply that maybe you don't use as often and give it a new life. You can do that with a lot of different embellishments with Copic markers because it will stick to non-porous surfaces like gems, metal embellishments it will color. It would color sequins if you had them in a color that you weren't particularly fond of. Any sort of non-porous surface, the Copic markers will be permanent on. So once I have a little smattering of gems, that's it for my card today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in more crafting tutorials, including Lawn Fawn stamps, please subscribe to my channel. And in fact, I'll leave you a video in the description box below of another card that I did with the same Lawn Fawn stamp set, and a link to the Lawnscaping Challenge blog so that you can check out the challenge this week, and to the Chalkola markers if you're interested. There'll even perhaps be a discount code below if you're interested in those. Thanks for watching. Bye.